You're the first guest we've had that said that they were inspired by Project Runway, and I absolutely relate to that. I was a big Project Runway fan for years and years. I'm Majenta Strongheart, and you're listening to The Bomb. Continuing our theme of DesignLab's community, I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, the brilliant multidisciplinary designer, Sophy Wong. After starting her career in graphic design, Sophie now specializes in designing wearable technology for creative expression. She loves learning new skills and techniques and sharing the design and build processes for her projects on her social channels, linked in the show notes of this episode. Her work has appeared on stage, screen, and in music videos, and she has spoken at countless creative technology conferences and maker events. Just last month, Sophie appeared on Adam Savage's Tested and attended Silicon with our previous guest, Jayy Moss. Sophie's design savvy, work ethic, openness to new ideas and techniques, and love of open source encapsulate so much of what DesignLab and our community stand for, and her insights in this episode are invaluable. If you stick around to the end, Sophie shares pro tips for all aspiring designers that you won't want to miss. Before we dive into this episode, I'd like to give listeners a quick crash course in wearable tech. The global wearable technology market size was valued at $40.65 billion in 2020 and is expected to expand at a compound annual growth rate of 13.8% from 2021 to 2028, according to a recent report published by Grandview Research. Most people think of wearable tech as a recent 21st century category of fashion, but this art form has been around far longer than we might think. To give a brief history, Sony's first transistor radio, the Sony TR-55, made its debut in 1955 and served as the model for many of the portable and wearable gadgets we use today. Wearable tech went more mainstream in 1975 when Sting, or a wristwatch calculator on the cover of the Police's Wrapped Around Your Finger. The Walkman launched in 1979 and became the most popular music device through the 1980s. In 1987, digital hearing aids were released, revolutionizing the healthcare industry and improving quality of life for millions of people. The 1990s brought the first wearable wireless webcam, paving the way for future IoT technologies. And wearable tech really hit its stride in the 2000s with the introduction of gadgets like Bluetooth headsets, iPods, and Fitbits. But it's not just physical tech that has inspired these modern creations. Human storytelling, especially through the genre of sci-fi, has also shaped the wearable tech we see today. Just think about books, movies, and TV shows like Back to the Future, Dune, Star Wars, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Xenon Girl of the 21st Century, and Phil of the Future, to name a few, all of which imagine pieces of wearable tech well before they existed in real life. Knowing the impact sci-fi designs have had on real-world products, I'm so excited to see what innovations Sophie's wearable tech devices and costumes inspire in the years to come. I am here in Seattle with Sophy Wong. Thank you so much for joining us on The Bomb today. I'm really excited that we got the chance to meet in person.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
I know. Glad to have you here.
So how are you? I know you're coming off of some big projects and getting ready for more, as always. Sort of, I feel like that's always the zone you're in. Yeah. But I would love to hear how it's been, sort of transitioning back to in-person engagements and things. I know you've been doing some workshops and external content, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'd love to hear how it's been going lately.
Oh yeah, it's been good. It's definitely, I feel like the thaw is happening after the pandemic kind of like shut everything down for so long. And I think it was like externally things kind of shut down, and then also, internally, personally, I didn't really know how to be creative with all of everything that's been going on in the world. So it's taken a long time to kind of get back to making things and putting things out. And I've also talked to other makers who have gone through this same period of time. And my husband as well is a big maker also. And we both say to each other, like, oh, why have I not done anything in a while? Or why have I not finished anything in a while? And we say back to that person, like, you've been making stuff this whole time. You're just for some reason not counting it,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so funny. We're our own worst critics, you know? Like, yeah, there's something in our minds that, like, that doesn't qualify, or that wasn't, it's not on this list of things I said I was going to do. So it doesn't count.
Exactly. But you're totally right. Like, something I've worked out as I've worked through my creative plan is the kind of wearable technology I like to make is expressive wearable technology, artistic wearable technology. So wearable technology is a huge term.
Right.
And I am really interested in using it to convey something. I've actually written down on a piece of paper that my experiments and my small projects and the things that maybe don't yield an entire big finished vision, those small things are part of my plan because I want innovation and exploration and learning to be part of what people think about when they think of me.
Absolutely. I think that's so important. And I love that you're sort of honoring like the playtime in between projects. I think that's something I've heard across the board with so many different creators, innovators, makers, whether they're more in the hardware space or more in the craft space or more in analog or digital or whatever it is, that like that time is so important. And we do often sort of gloss over it or like think that it's unproductive or something because it's not meeting this vision of a finished product or project. And so I love that you're giving a little shout out to that. And I love that you put it into your plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that you're being more intentional about it being okay and like being good. It's not just okay. It's like probably necessary, I would think, for a lot of us, especially to have that balance. And on that note, I'd love to ask you, because I feel like I've seen both directions on your channels as far as when you are integrating a new technique out of necessity for a build and learning something new or trying a new tool versus you were playing with a tool and were inspired by a technique you came up with and then built a project off of that. So do you feel like, what's the split with those? And could you give us a couple examples?
I really don't think that one approach is better than the other or more valid than the other. And I really want to keep both options available to me. And sometimes I'll use one approach to get to the other approach. So often I'll do that kind of exploration first. And I'll look at the tools that I think I might need to use for this project. If I have access to them, I'll get hours on the machine so I can understand how it works. And then I might have enough information and understanding to develop my own techniques or to see if I can apply it the way that I thought I would be able to apply it. Oftentimes not. Someone actually came to me to make a spacesuit for their short film. So I've been working on that for quite a while. I thought I was going to get that done a lot faster, but everything takes longer than you think it's going to take.
That sounds like an awesome project.
It's a really awesome project. And one reason I really wanted to do it is I knew it was going to incorporate a lot of different kinds of making. Sewing, I knew I could get 3D printing in there, laser cutting, some CNC milling, electronics, programming. Like I know all of that stuff can come together in a big giant project like that. And that's why. And also, of course, design. I really wanted to focus for the last couple of years and from now on, like I really want to focus on design as being the driver for the things that I do. So I wouldn't have taken this spacesuit project if they'd already had a design and they just wanted to build it. I really wanted to design it and then build it. But I want to remind myself not to just get hung up on the technique. I want to remind myself to apply the technique with a concept and get to something that's really impactful beyond just the fact that it's 3D printed on fabric.
I'm curious sort of where has this refocus come from? Did you have some experiences that informed this?
So ever since I learned the word designer, which I didn't really understand what a designer was until I was in college and I encountered the idea of a graphic designer and I decided I wanted to pursue that. Ever since then, I feel like I've been kind of trying to prove to myself, trying to prove to other people that I'm a designer. And I thought early on that what was going to actually prove that would be having someone else like give me a business card for their company that said Sophy Wong, graphic designer. You know, like I thought that was going to be the proof that I was a designer. But I didn't feel like I was using my design skills to their fullest potential. After I'd been through a few other graphic design jobs, I ended up having a really good job as a graphic designer for Old Navy. And I learned a lot in that job, and it had a lot of reach, which was exciting. I was designing store windows that are all over the country and in multiple languages, and that was really cool. But it wasn't activating my design brain in the way that I thought it would when I was studying design in school. What interested me more in terms of what I was being exposed to at the time was the fashion side of it. And I'd always liked to make things. I was sewing at the time. And so I thought, well, maybe I can take what I've learned, at this job and apply it to something that is more fulfilling and exciting to me. And so I started making clothes and selling them in a really small kind of fashion line in San Francisco. And then we ended up moving to Seattle. So I ended up kind of putting all of that on hold for a little bit, moving to Seattle, and then kind of thinking like, is this what I want to do? Like, do I want to go into this like manufacturing role? I thought, well, if the thing that's hanging me up about this is manufacturing, maybe I don't want to do something that's producing a product like that. Maybe something like costuming would be a way for me to activate my design brain, do some of the making. And I've always been interested in costumes. And I thought, I have some skills that maybe could translate into that field. So let me try that. And so I got an internship here in Seattle with Seattle Opera, and in their costume shop.
Could you just tell us a little bit more about how you started getting more into wearable tech and more involved in the open source hardware community, and what's brought you to the projects you're working on now that we're going to get into a little bit more?
Yeah, I want to say I was watching the second season of Project Runway. So this is a while ago now, but there was someone on there, Diana Ng, who was the first person I ever saw who was putting technology into garments. She was doing it on the show. It was like her trademark was like putting technology into her fashion. And I was just like totally blown away when I saw that. And my husband was like, you should try that. Like, you should do that stuff. That's cool. I'm like, do you think I could? Like, I don't know. And it turned out that Diana Ng, she wrote a book. So I went and I bought her book and I started doing her tutorials.
Oh, amazing.
And I learned from her, that these things even existed. I didn't know that you could get, a camera that was so small that you could sew it into something. So her book was really huge for me. And I did all the tutorials, and almost as soon as I finished the first tutorial, I started to get ideas about what I wanted to make. And I started taking her tutorials and some other people's tutorials and kind of like modifying them for what I wanted to build. And just like always, like my ambitions for what I wanted to make, like totally outgrew what I knew how to do. So I just kept adding new skills to my toolbox and just kept making little small things. And I kind of went through a period where I started posting these things on my personal like social media, and like my friends didn't know what to make of it all. Like they just were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm doing electronics now.
Yeah.
And
Get
so
with it.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm sewing.
Do you remember what your first electronics project was?
Yeah, so it was I think it was just a tutorial from Diana Ng. So it's a sweater that I sewed from scratch, and then I sewed LEDs into it and used a LilyPad microcontroller to program it. And so the lights just go boop, 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 boop. They just are a sequential kind of animation. And it's a sewn circuit. It's a soft circuit, and it's totally not insulated. So, I put it on and I'm like, ooh, why does this feel itchy?
So
like,
eating me up.
Totally shocking me. Oh, no. But, like that was and then I learned.
That's a learning experience, yes.
Yeah, like, okay, that makes sense. I understand that now. Yeah. So, yeah, like, and I still have that, and I keep it, and I bring it to Maker Faire, and when I do talks, I'm like, this is where I started,
started. It's important for people to see that. And I love that I just like have to do a shout out to shows like Project Runway and Cake Boss and all these other things. Absolutely informed my making journey and motivation to try things, and were super inspiring. So I'm glad to hear another new influence in that regard.
Oh yeah,
that I can relate to.
Yeah, and I think like I always kind of remind myself of this, like Diana, she didn't win the show. She didn't have to win the show to change my life. She just had to be on it, and I saw her and I'm like, well, that's blowing my mind and opening a door that I didn't know was even there. So
I think this relates exactly to what you're talking about, as far as you are definitely someone who is constantly sharing new and interesting things with the world through your social media channels and your tutorials and even articles you've done. And so why is it important to you to share these kinds of things? And what do you feel like is the value of open sourcing your process? And maybe even, I'm sure you've learned a lot from the open source hardware community, and you're very involved and one of our most awesome Hackaday Prize judges as well. So you also support in a lot of ways. So yeah, why do you believe sort of in the open source community?
Well, I've definitely gained so much from other people who have made their processes available through writing up their, documentation, sharing the learnings that they went through in their projects, writing up tutorials or documenting their work on places like Hackaday, Instructables, all those places where you can post tutorials. It pushes all of us forward, because you can look at communities like the 3D printing community, and like you'll see that where that community started out and where they are now, it's incredible the work that comes out of there. And same thing with sewing, like people sharing information, sharing techniques, and sharing resources pushes the community to a place where you couldn't go if you were just an individual. And especially with electronics, like making these things available to people, the fact that you can just go and buy a microcontroller, plug it into your computer, and program it. I mean, I would not be able to do that if it wasn't for a lot of other people explaining to me how to do that, So I think it's a passion for me to just make sure that everything I'm doing is out there for other people to learn, because I know it's going to come back to me. Like I know that someone's going to see something that I did and have a better idea and figure it out, work it out, make it happen, and then put it out there. And then I'll see it and I'll be like, oh my God, I never thought of that. And then just the friends that I've made at Maker Faire, and other maker events, super conference, like places where you're around like-minded people who are in a similar pathway, who you feel like, they're going to understand your struggles because they've been there too. Having that is so, so valuable.
So as you guys know, we've seen Sophie at a number of SuperCon talks.
Please welcome to the Hackaday Super Conference stage, Sophy Wong.
Hello. I'm a designer and a maker, and I make a lot of wearable tech projects. And I make a lot of aesthetic projects, I make a lot of costumes, and I'm very interested in wearable tech because I like the challenge of designing for the human body. And I'm really interested in the ways that technology is becoming more integrated into our lives and into our identities and into our presentation of our identities. And lately I've been making a lot of things with machines. I've been using my laser cutter to make jewelry, to use materials like acrylic and wood, and even just cardboard. And then sometimes the technology is just a tool that I use for making the piece. And I realized that I use actually a lot of different kinds of machines in my work. Sometimes I use sewing machines and band saws, but today I want to talk about a specific kind of machine, and that's this kind of machine. These are machines that have a CAD component incorporated into their process. And so this is my 3D printer. It's a Creality CR10S, and my laser cutter is a Glowforge laser cutter. It's a Glowforge Basic, and I'm just starting to learn how to use a Bantam CNC mill. But as much as I love working with my machines, the magic doesn't happen inside the machine. I think there's an idea out there, I certainly had this idea when I started working with these machines, that using a 3D printer, using a laser cutter in your creative work is going to save you a lot of time or alleviate a lot of the tedium because the machine is doing a lot of the work for you. And it's really the journey to pressing the button where all the work happens. And it's actually the exciting part for me because that's where all the design happens. For me, I really feel like I'm in a point now where it doesn't feel like I'm being controlled by the technology. I feel like it's a collaboration between me and the machine, and find innovative ways to still make the things that I want to make using this technology that's actually so accessible now. Like my 3D printer is a very basic 3D printer, just FDM, pretty affordable, and available to so many people. Thank you so much.
We were just talking to Jay on the podcast, actually, and it was right after he'd returned from your work together on Tested, which we'll get to as well. But I thought it was really interesting, some of the points he was making about the maker community, open source hardware community, and how, you know, he felt that it did feel less exclusive than some other communities.
Yeah, and I think the more I meet people like Jay, like who are in a similar field as me, but they're definitely doing their own thing, it gives me a little bit more confidence too, because I'm like, it just lets you know that everybody's kind of got their own take on things.
Right.
And so you don't have to be exactly like someone else to get each other. You know, you can, it's kind of more interesting when you each have a different background and you have something to share with each other that the other person maybe didn't know, or you know, you can it's more interesting and it's more fun when you can each share something new with each other. And then it also is like, you know, every single person is going to have their own path through this stuff, and every single person is coming from a different origin. And so I think like a lot of times the things that hold me back, that make me feel like a little bit nervous to share about myself, are like, yeah, I'm like, oh, they're going to think I'm weird, or oh, they're going to think I'm just like different, and like that I don't fit their expectation of who should be here doing this. But then when you talk to people, you find out like everybody's different.
Yeah. Then you see someone making like LED underwear and you're like, it's fine.
Yeah, it's totally
I can make anything.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
Exactly.
So on that note, could you tell us more about this recent experience on Tested, what you were developing for that, and then also your workshop you just did in preparation for Silicon, headset workshop. I'm like, what's the term? All of the above. But yeah.
So for Tested, oh my gosh, that was just like such an amazing trip. I went down to San Francisco and filmed for a day with Adam Savage in the cave for Tested. And it was just so much fun. We shot something for their YouTube channel, and then we also shot something for their VR series on Quest. So you'll be in the cave with me and Adam. It's like this super inspiring place. It also is just like, there's a million things in there. And so it's kind of overwhelming. But at the same time, Adam is so easy to talk to and so kind and so just genuinely excited to talk about anything maker related, that he and Jay and we were talking together for a while, and it just was so nice. It was just super comfortable and just super like restorative. It felt like, especially coming off of the pandemic, like not talking to anybody in person for so long, to go there and have that experience was just like amazing.
That's how I felt during all of these podcast episodes. It's just been literally so exciting to talk to people in person again. And talk about all our favorite things.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit more about a little bit more of the nitty gritty technical aspects of the build you were showing on there, or is it top secret?
No, it's not top secret. In fact, it's just that I haven't shared a lot of it because I was working so focused. I was just like
for that deadline
on doing it. And like I said, I kind of used this opportunity to get work done that I wanted to do. So I produced 3 pieces to take on this trip, and they're all focused on 3D printing on fabric. So I also wanted to explore this technique, but I wanted to take that idea that I have of taking the technique and really like applying it and pushing it and going kind of deep with it. So I did 3, I brought a few other pieces that I'd already done that are 3D printed on fabric. So I brought my full dress. I brought a new piece, which is a headpiece that's all 3D printed on fabric, and it's kind of like a like a headdress, maybe crossed with a wig, maybe crossed with a helmet.
Okay, fun.
Yeah, and that one's really beautiful. It's printed with quantum filament from Matter Hackers, so it's that two-tone.
I think I saw some of this on your page.
One side is yellow. Yeah,
Awesome.
That one I've been posting about. And then I made another piece that's a collar that integrates lighting. So I wanted to have a few pieces that had electronics in them too. So I have one piece that's a collar that has lighting in it, and that's 3D printed on fabric, and it's very dimensional. And it has this kind of interesting effect where it kind of turned into like a musical instrument or like a sound instrument, because it rattles against itself and it makes this kind of weird clicky sounds. Totally unanticipated, but kind of an interesting like byproduct of the technique. And then sort of my favorite piece that I brought was this glove that I made that is 3D printed on fabric, layered on top of a leather glove, integrated LED lighting.
Oh, this one here?
It's this one here, yeah. And it's I made it big so that Adam could wear it, and it's totally soft.
Can I try it on?
Yes.
Fun.
So there's
we'll have to get pictures later.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. The integration here, really nice.
Thanks.
There's some design parameters around wearables that are probably really foreign to people who don't make wearables. You know, you mentioned shocking and insulation. What are some of the things you think about in that regard? And then how has your approach to incorporating lighting into your pieces evolved over your work?
I don't want to give a client something that's so, electronically complex that they can't fix it if I'm not there.
Right. That's so important, like for user friendliness.
Yeah. And I don't want to give them a battery that's dangerous. I don't want to give them a battery they don't recognize, they don't know how to use, and I have to train them on. So I've really I'm going away from LiPo batteries. LiPo batteries are small and powerful, and they're really great to integrate in something if you don't have a lot of space, but they're really delicate. You really have to know how to use them, and I just don't want to take any chances if I'm not on site to really manage that garment. So I think it's much safer to use other batteries. So I use, if I have to use something really powerful, I'll use a USB battery, like power bank. Yeah. Or I like to use batteries people recognize, like AA, AAA, coin cell batteries. Right. They can just go to, a store and buy it. They know how to use it. So I've really simplified on that. And then sometimes for maintenance, for cleaning, I now prefer keeping the electronics a bit separate. I want to be able to just remove the circuit.
Modular,
yeah. So, for the spacesuit, I'm making sure that everything that is touching the skin is not going to have integrated electronics. So the undersuit, it's not going to have electronics. All the electronics will sit on top. So keeping things really separate, simplifying how it works, and then really designing it for knowing whether I want it to be used in a still photograph or used in video. Most of the things that I'm doing, they end up in one or the other form.
Are your dream clients mostly in entertainment, in theater and movies, maybe music videos, things like that sort of thing? Or what other kind of clients do you keep an eye out for?
Exactly. I want to do, like I said, expressive wearable technology. And so I want to do things that are part of a narrative, like a costume, or exactly like music artists, music videos, performers, dancers. I'm really passionate about dance, so I would love to do costume work for dance. And, anyone who's sort of a visual performing artist like that, I think that my work is a good match for. And I want to be in from the beginning. Like I want to be designing that piece and creating it to complete their vision of what they want to do, basically.
Absolutely. I feel like I could totally see your stuff in some awesome music videos. I hope to see that one day. For others who also want to make a living making awesome wearable projects, what would you say are some of the tips you have, maybe for the ways that you've supplemented income with other things that still have helped as far as training your skills or getting to work on things related, but it's not full-time the atelier studio that you're shooting for.
Yeah.
So just any tips and tricks you have for different ways that people can sustain themselves in this kind of industry.
Yeah. So I did what I call double duty for quite a while before I quit my costume shop job. I was, working at the costume shop full time, and then I would come home at the end of the day and I would work on articles. And so I pumped out just a ton of projects for Hackspace magazine. I did an article for Make magazine. I did some tutorial work for other companies too, for Adafruit, for Bear Conductive, just anyone that would let me write an article about the project that I wanted to create. So I was doing double duty in my work, but I wanted my project to do almost like triple duty.
Yeah.
So it would end up in my portfolio, and then it would also become a tutorial that I could get paid for. If you're going to do that for a period of time, design your projects to be bite-sized. So something that, for Hackspace, for example, they wanted projects that could fit a tutorial into like 6 pages and like maybe 20 photos max. So I was designing my project to fit in that format. At some point, you have to really ride that and decide when you stop saying yes to everything. But there's definitely going to be a period of time where saying yes to everything is the path.
Is valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for the pro tips. I think it is really useful for people who really don't know where to start. Okay, so our final question is, since we are the Bomb Podcast, what do you think of the name?
I love it. I love it. Clever.
Yes.
Very clever, yeah.
We try. So what would you can interpret this question however you like. It's been fun to see how every guest kind of imagines it differently. But what's on your personal bill of materials? You can see this as what gets you up in the morning, or what gets you, working on your goals, or just gets you through the week, or your however you want to interpret it, or your literal bill of materials. Some people have given us like their grocery list and things like that, which I think is funny. So
yeah, for me it would definitely be inspiration. So like I said, I kind of identify the things that I want to be inspired by in a general way, and then I like open up a stream for them. So I like to have magazines coming to me that I find interesting, that I can just expose myself to lots of different types of inspiration. Setting aside time to look through books. I love art books. So, if I feel creatively like I need some kind of like boost, I might go look through my collection of art books, or go to my mom's house and look at her books, and just like having that physical photographs to flip through is just really inspiring to me. So inspiration is big. I've been getting out a lot during the pandemic in terms of like, literally, I'm just talking about walking outside. And I realize now that like a vitamin for me is like being outside. So Kim and I take a walk every single day, and that is something that is like necessary for me now, as like just to be normal and stable and like put together is like our daily walk. I also am getting regular exercise now that I think also I was a little sporadic about before the pandemic, but the pandemic has, given me time to actually work exercise into my routine in a really like consistent way. And that's been a total game changer for me.
Huge.
So huge. And, definitely my family. So my husband, my cat, my parents. I sometimes forget to really like, I can get so focused on my work and on my ideas and my ambitions and my goals, my dreams, that I just, kind of
get insulated or something.
Yeah, like cocoon myself up in those things. And it's really important for me to remember, like, that's my stabilizing force. Oh, and I see my cat coming down the stairs right now. She just heard her name, and she's like, oh, it's me. So my family is really important. And really, number one has been, well, maybe number two or number three, but very important and high up on my list has been that sort of document that I wrote for myself that is my, compass needle that helped me figure out what direction I want to go in, kind of defined for myself who I see myself as and who I want to be. And I just go back. It's like literally a document
Your
that
manifesto.
I wrote.
Yes.
My personal,
Love it.
Yes. And I just, when I get lost or confused or I feel like I don't know what I'm doing anymore, I go back and I look at that and I'm like, oh yeah, that's it. That's it right there.
Love it. This is, again, such a unique answer compared to past guests. I love that this question is bringing up like really unique responses from everyone. That's what we were hoping for, but you never know how it's going to work out. So just one more time to summarize. Inspiration, family, daily walk or getting outside, exercise, and your manifesto.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome and can totally relate to a number of those things. And there is something just so powerful about writing things down and having a plan and still being, open to opportunities and things that may come and go or whatever that you didn't necessarily plan for. But like you said, having that compass to just check yourself sometimes and reinstill your confidence in what you're working towards, I think is so crucial. So thank you for sharing all the pro tips and a little insight into your journey. I found it super inspiring and I know our audience will too. Thank you, Sophie.
Oh, good. Thank you so much for having me.
As we mentioned, a lot of Sophie's work is inspired by science fiction references, whether they be movies or comics or different things she's reading or interested in. And I think that's super common in the technology space. And oftentimes technology and sci-fi entertainment actually precedes, technology that we end up experiencing later on, which is really cool. I always think about when I watched Xenon Girl of the 21st Century. I remember being mind blown when they were basically doing what we now call, FaceTiming, video calls over a mobile device. And I definitely, at the time that I watched that movie growing up, didn't really think that I would live in a world where that existed, which is pretty cool. Do you guys have any moments like that?
I remember when I first watched Mission Impossible, and I remember when Ethan, he's in the train and he has this device by his throat that helps him change the voice so that it sounds like someone else. And he can fake the voice to sound like a woman or like someone else. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, this is high tech. This is the future.
How about you, Bruce? Any tech from sci-fi that...
Yeah, kind of going along, I see a lot of wearable technology as like an assistive technology. And one of the top things that came up in my mind when we were going over the subject is, of course, you have Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge's Pfizer. It's one of the most iconic pieces of wearable tech you can kind of come up with. And everyone knew it was just like a banana clip that they turned sideways. But because of the strength of the writing, the portrayal of the character by LeVar Burton, they sold it as this amazing futurative device that over the course of the series actually, because of his visual impairment, they used the technology to get them out of some crazy scenario that was, if they did, it was life or death.
I love the idea of adding almost like super technology or superpower, so to speak, to an assistive device. That's such an interesting design challenge. And it's something I remember us discussing when we were doing our Hackaday Prize Dream Team Challenge kind of setup with Momentum for All. Yeah. We were working with Aranya and Stephanie from their team talking about how we were going to put together this challenge. And some of the things we were talking about is human-computer interfaces for people with different levels of mobility. But how could it not just solve the problem, but is this an opportunity for additional functionality? And I think that's something that is such a cool opportunity for designers. Like, I'm going to use this sort of as a chance to be like call for action because we've discussed this before too, Giovanni and I, like what are the opportunities in like hearing aids, for example, to not just make them do their job, but make them a fun accessory and make them, do other things so that maybe it becomes a thing that more than just the people who need them want to wear. And I think that's a really awesome challenge that more people should be taking on. I was trying to think about what wearable projects we've worked on at the lab before. And one interesting one that we did a while back, it was called the DOM glove, which stands for Document object model glove. And you can actually find it on hackaday.io. We made an instruction page for it. And it was user interface. You know, the idea was sort of to be a type of mouse, but more of a creative mouse to more intuitively interact with large quantities of data on your computer. So less functionally as far as like trying to click and enlarge and drag something, but almost a way the designer was thinking about, that we were working with, was thinking about a way to almost feel the data, right?
Yes, well, it was an experiment to try to, as you said, parse through a lot of information with a scrolling device. So definitely check out the hackaday.io page.
Yeah, it looked like kind of like a golfer batter's glove with flexible sensors on the fingers.
So this was an interesting experiment we worked on.
Indeed.
If you like The Bomb, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow SupplyFrame and Hackaday on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube, and DesignLab at SupplyFrame DesignLab on Instagram and Twitter. The Bomb is a SupplyFrame podcast written, produced, and edited by Frank Driscoll and co-edited by Daniel Ferreira. Executive producers are Ryan Tillotson and Tyler Nielsen. Theme music is by Anna Hogbin with show art by Thomas Schneider. Special thanks to Giovanni Salinas, Bruce Dominguez, Thomas Woodward, Jin Kumar, Jordan Clark, Matt Gunn, the entire SupplyFrame team, and you, our wonderful listeners. I'm your host, Majenta Strongheart.